Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is Election Edge Monday's edition, 6 o'clock on the East Coast, 3 o'clock here out west. And welcome back to Election Edge after a relatively low-key weekend. Now, let me start with this, folks. Boy, the Democrats, they were beating their chest over the weekend on Sunday when NBC News and CBS released their national polling results. You know how the liberals are, they always like the legacy media. Well, my guest today, Mr. Richard Battle, and I will talk about some other news that hit today, and it's got Democrats screaming, yelling, blaming pollsters, you know, the stuff they accuse Republicans of doing all the time. Richard, welcome to Election Edge. Happy to have you with me today.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thank you so much for having us with you again.
Hey, listen, you and I have a lot of shows together, Schaftlein Report over the years. I think this is your first time on Election Edge. Richard, they were, when those NBC and CBS polls came out showing 5-point lead and 4-point lead respectively, however, very, very close in the states. Again, you had liberals almost thinking the election was in the bag. You know, they've seen all the glowing media on Kamala Harris, the deification, if you will, just fawning reports, 95% positive publicity versus 95% negative publicity for Donald Trump. And then, you know, you had that one poll out that came and said, well, Donald Trump is leading in North Carolina by 2, by Georgia by 4, and by Arizona by 4. And I believe, let's see, who was the outfit that did that one? Let's see, who was that? Okay. Those were the numbers, 4, 2, and 2. And then, Richard, right before we come on the air today, we get an Emerson poll. It's got Trump up in Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. Now, because that poll, folks that are so late breaking, I don't have the breakdown on it. But Richard, that New York Times Siena poll of Trump plus 4 in Arizona and in Georgia, plus 2 in North Carolina, that's got the liberals shaking right now.
Well, I think you're correct. And as I always say with you, the first thing we have to remember is dead voters and illegal voters are never polled. So always take them with a grain of salt. But what's interesting to me is the New York Times poll, because we usually see polls get tighter toward election day as the pollsters try to protect their reputations. But to see the New York Times come out this early with this type of number makes me wonder, because of their normal positions, and makes me think there could be more credibility to it. And of course, we need to see the background of it, that we're seeing more likely voters poll now, but the margin of error I want to see, the sample breakdown I want to see how they might guide those polls in a way to stampede voters, because I believe this has been the largest propaganda campaign in my lifetime during this election.
Oh, there's no doubt about it, Richard. I mean, you talk about Russian disinformation, you know, in 2016 and in 2020. Excuse me, that pales in comparison to this. I mean, you've had every major legacy media outlet trying to use polls to influence voters to either make Trump look like he's further behind than he is, albeit most of the time they do acknowledge, excuse me, that swing states are tight. But he's actually, some of these pollsters are actually trying to put out data discouraging people from voting or contributing to Trump or being even associated with Trump, because they're trying to paint an image that he doesn't have a chance, when in reality, when you see the New York Times Siena, when you see CNN, when you see Fox News poll, again, Fox News poll had Harris 50, Trump 48. And, you know, true to form, Juan Williams said, how can 48% of people vote for Trump? It's got to be a racist poll. I mean, come on, Juan Williams, you're better than that. So, I mean, Richard, I'm looking at this stuff, and polls are, again, we talk about Charlotte, but it's a snapshot in time, and you want to look for trends. And obviously what you just said What are the dynamics behind it? Was it registered voters or likely voters? Obviously, likely voters better. What was the breakdown? How many men were in the poll? How many women were in the poll? What was the racial makeup of the poll? Were there more Democrats than Republicans sampled? So, Richard, you got a great point. And of course, your patented line about people and what was the other one you used? You said they're never counted. So, I mean, true to form. That's why I love having you on. You got that great sense of humor. But no, let's dive into this here a little bit, because in the Real Clear Politics average, it's got Kamala Harris up by 2. 40, let's see, it's 49-4 to 47-2. Well, I mean, I could sort of maybe buy into that on an average, but again, it's got some skewed numbers in there too, Richard. It's a Quinnipiac poll in there that way oversampled Democrats. So, and it doesn't yet have these new polling pieces in there. So I don't know I don't like to read too much into it, but Richard, this does look like it's pretty good news for Trump if two major polls, New York Times, Siena, and then this Emerson one, have him up in these swing states.
Well, I think it's good news, but I always also look at, we're dealing with professional politicians in both campaigns, and they want to drive fundraising. So they'll use good news or bad news to drive fundraising. And then they get commissions when they do advertising buys as well. And so it's in their best interest to drive as many dollars toward their campaigns as possible. And if either campaign looks too far ahead or too far behind, it could shut the money off. And so that to me is another thing I look at, whereas everyday people like us, we just look at things from a lens of the election without all of these side agendas that are going on behind the scenes.
Well, a little birdie just whispered something in my ear, Richard, that the Harris campaign is now considering going down to the border in Arizona this Thursday or Friday. We see two polls showing Trump up +4 in one poll in Arizona and leading, we don't know by how much. And now all of a sudden the borders are that, never went to the border other than one visit to El Paso where they didn't litter anywhere near the border. Richard, what do you make of that? I mean, maybe it's not these public polls, but could their internal polling be showing, hey, the internal polling is reflecting what the public polling is showing. You better get your butt down to Arizona and address this, because this issue is rapidly causing you problems.
Well, I think it shows their story's not working, one. And two, their campaign's all about the optics, especially on the border. All they want to show on the border is not as many people are crossing. And that's why they've flown 500,000 people over the border. So if she goes down there and gets close to the border, in El Paso, she only got within 9 miles, it'll be for a photo op. And as we've said for the last almost 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration has spent more time and money fighting Texas than they have fighting illegal aliens crossing. And so there is no way she can gain any credibility about stopping illegal immigration, regardless of what kind of trip she makes at this time.
Yeah, you're right about that. And you know what? I get a sense of this, Richard. I think the shtick is starting to wear off. I mean, the joy and the vibes are meeting economic and immigration reality. And a lot of people that had predicted the bounce out of the Democratic convention, again, a lot of people felt, pollsters, mainstream media, a lot of voters felt she, quote, won the debate, but she only gained anywhere from half a point to a point. And if that debate performance was so good, she should have gained more, but she didn't. And now it appears even some of the gain from the debate is worn off. And Richard, I really got to believe it's because the non-answers on virtually every question, there comes a point where the American people say, come on, enough is enough. She is struggling, as is her campaign, Richard, with the fundamental central question: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Well, I think to use a term in business, they're trying to put lipstick on the pig, so to speak. And they're trying to be able to dodge their record from the future. They're trying to be the change candidates when they are the status quo candidates. And she can't answer those questions because if she does, she's either going to lie again or have to tell the truth, which is she and Joe Biden are the causation of all of these problems. And so when people are living real life and President Trump can tie their real lives to Biden Harris, it's an indefensible position, I believe, for her.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And it's not just the economy with look, when people think the economy, they think inflation. A lot of people do because it's been 21% under Biden and Harris. Yes, inflation's coming down. It's down 2.5 to 3%. That's why the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates, and we talked about that last week. But the illegal immigration piece is affecting, it's not just border states. It's affecting the livelihood of millions of Americans, and people are seeing it, and they see no end in sight. And that argument she tries to push about, well, it's Trump's fault that we didn't pass a new law. Voters don't want to hear we're going to pass a law to stop illegal immigration. They want to see a show of force at the border. And, frankly, they remember, look, Trump tried to build a wall. He got some of it built before Biden came in. And he had a remain in Mexico policy that arguably worked pretty good because the illegal immigration numbers under Trump were dramatically lower than they were under Harris. So I think those two pieces of, having highly elevated prices continuing to stay elevated, the illegal immigration showing no signs, and then, Richard, the crime that goes with it, too. I mean, you're seeing story after story. Police unions, they're supporting Trump. Veterans groups supporting Trump. People engaged in law enforcement supporting Trump. And, we saw last week for the first time in forever, the Teamsters, where 60% of their members are voting for Trump, declined to give an endorsement. That was sort of the non-endorsement endorsement, in my opinion. Hell, if 60% of your members want to endorse a candidate, why aren't you supporting your members? But again, Richard, the trends here is what I'm looking for here. And I'm looking for, and I'm saying, look, if likely voters, which is what that New York Times Siena poll was showing, likely voters going 50 to 45, 50, 46 in Trump's favor, Richard, those are big deals. And here's a harbinger of this, too. A lesser known polling outfit from some small college in Virginia, they only Kamala Harris up by 2 points, folks. 2 points in Virginia? Richard, if he's only down 2 in Virginia, that again could be reaffirming some of these internal pollings that Trump has. Also, John McLaughlin, Trump's private pollster, said, look, some of the numbers on these NBC polls and CBS polls, the sample size, the type of voter they picked, he sort of panned the poll. You expect that sometimes, but a guy like McLaughlin, he's very well respected. So I don't know. It's tight, but I'm feeling better about these Trump situation in these swing states today than I did on Friday.
Well, on inflation, years ago in the 70s, we went through inflation and we thought we'd never get rid of it. And finally, Ronald Reagan and Paul Volcker, we got rid of inflation. And everyone said, surely we won't be so stupid as to do that again. And looky here where we're at. The government once again did the exact same thing they did in the 70s to cause inflation. The government can stop inflation if they stop spending too much money. And I don't know about you, but to me, when I go to the grocery store or restaurants, I don't see a 21% change in the last 3+ years. I see 50% plus change. Now, gas has come down a little bit, but food, groceries, restaurants, all of those things are up significantly more. And the border has 3 components. 1, we have national security. 2, we've got health security. And then 3, we've got financial security that you mentioned. So to me, that's why it's the number one issue, because it combines all 3 of those.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I'm experiencing the same thing you are. Boy, and in the state of Florida, you've got insurance issues creating all kind of havoc down there. All right, look, we're a little past break. We're going to take our first break here, but when we get back, we're going to dive into some other things relative to election edge. Harris and Trump, race is tightening. Good news for Trump. See you in about 90 seconds.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
720-605-3900. Give Dr. Kirk Elliott. It's crazy times, folks. If you're looking to have some precious metals as a hedge against the inflation and some of the other issues, Kirk's a big supporter of Patriot TV. Call that number, and they'll take good care of you. Really, really good people at Kirk Elliott, PhD. All right, Richard, every time I see this stuff about polling back and forth, I always, judge by what this Democratic pollster, Nate Silver, has to say. And he's sort of cautiously guiding people that although Harris has that slight lead right now, it's Trump the one that's, making headway here. And I always sort of literally take that with a grain of salt. Key question I have, which I want to ask you, the turnout, okay? And I'm not talking about the dead voters and the people that vote twice, but the normal voter who votes once, does his civic duty. Does Trump have the turnout in place, and will Republicans heed the advice to vote early versus waiting on election day?
Well, I think, and I've been a believer of voting early for a long time, and there's two reasons I think we need to vote early. One, if I vote early and I die, my vote still counts. But second, and more importantly, when I vote, it's registered and the campaigns can see that I am a Republican primary voter and I voted in the general election. And so then they can cease any effort to try to get me to the polls and focus on other people who've already voted. And if we can get enough votes out during absentee periods in the states, and they can do that by precinct and by congressional districts. So if they can see that, then they can focus like a laser on people who've not voted yet to increase voter turnout. And to me, that's one of the most important things we all can do to help the campaigns.
Those are great points, Richard. And, again, saving resources and banking votes. I mean, look, we can say what we want about how we dislike Democratic policies. We dislike the race baiting that the Democrats do, the, generic, people that are put in categories. I don't like any of that kind of stuff. But one thing you have to admit they're very good at is getting out the vote and getting their voters to vote early. I mean, Christ, we went into Pennsylvania, with down 600,000 votes on election day. I mean, that's tough to overcome. So, we in the 2020 election, early voting, we got outvoted 5-1. Now, I've seen a lot of effort put forward, Richard, to stop that. But if we could even get it down that margin from 5 down to 2-1, boy, that would be a big improvement. And I got to believe most of the lessons have been learned so that, forget the identity politics, again, that we were just talking about. If Republicans and independents that support Trump will get out and, vote early, get those votes banked, I think that's going to bode very well for Donald Trump. Another interesting anecdotal thing, Richard, in Michigan of all places, Arab Americans are none too happy with Kamala Harris. And I think the mayor of a city 5 minutes outside of Detroit, Democratic Muslim mayor, said he's coming out and supporting Trump. Because when Trump was president, the Middle East, Richard, was not on fire like it is right now. I mean, as we're coming to air, Israel is still fighting in Gaza, massive problems there, launched a major attack in Lebanon. Last week we had first the pagers, then the radios. Well, now we have, according to media reports, over 490 people killed and 1,300 wounded. So a lot of Arab Americans, they are not happy with this Biden administration. And they're saying, wait a minute, under Trump, yeah, we all have our differences, but there was no war. The Abraham Accords got done, and we weren't, losing thousands and thousands of people getting killed. Richard, I think this is a big deal. And, I'm sort of in Trump's camp. I mean, one thing he's brought together is Jewish Americans and Arab Americans, meaning, neither one of them want to see this war's going on. And they're thinking back under Trump, we didn't have it. So, Richard, could this really play a key role in battleground Michigan, where you really have a very large Arab contingency living in Michigan?
Well, once again, the Democrats are trying to have it both ways because they're trying to please the Jewish vote and the Arab votes. And as we say in Texas, only two things stay in the middle of the road: dead skunks and armadillos. So I believe they're dodging like that versus they understand Trump's direct language. He's pro-Israel, and they understand that, but they also understand, because of what he did with the Abraham Accords, that he can be trusted to make a fair deal for both parties that both parties can live with. And that, to me, is so different than what we're seeing now. We're seeing weakness projected by the administration. They're insisting on a two-state solution, which Israel will never go for, because the Arabs over there only want to extinguish the Israeli state and will never be satisfied until that happens. And so the current administration is pursuing a strategy that's unworkable.
Oh, unworkable. It's untenable. I mean, when your opponent compares you to a termite, I mean, there is no basis at all. And even Harris, she has no clue what she's talking about, has come out and said, well, we want peace, but we want a two-state solution. We want a place for the Palestinians. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect the vice president, but while she's saying this, there's reports coming out of Israel that Netanyahu's likely to step up further operations in Gaza to further remove Palestinians to create a greater buffer zone while he's waging a two-front war with Hezbollah in the north. Richard, this doesn't get a lot of media attention, but in northern Israel, for I can't remember, like a 10-mile buffer, people that lived there had to be evacuated because of Hezbollah missiles raining down on Israelis living in northern Israel. So they not only have the front going on with Lebanon and fighting Hezbollah, they're fighting Hamas in Gaza. You got the Iranians supplying weapons thanks to the Biden administration. And Trump's right about this. When he was president, Iran was on the ropes. Now, because of some inexplicable desire to have dialogue and make Iran wealthy again by the Biden administration, now we're in this mess. So, and Richard, I want to add this. When you said weakness, oh my God, a lot of people think Kamala Harris couldn't hold a candle to some of these foreign leaders she's going to have to deal with if she won. What about the fact that our own sitting president couldn't even conduct a cabinet meeting and turn it over to his wife? Boy, that was a tell as to who's really running the government. I hope not, but maybe so.
Well, one of the greatest surprises when I was in Israel was that Arabs and Israelis live together, work together, they get along together in Israel, of all places. And to me, if they can get along in Israel, they can get along in the region. And going to the cabinet meeting, to me, that's one of the two examples in the last 3 days where Kamala Harris did not exhibit leadership and demonstrate that she was ready for the presidency. And when Joe Biden let Jill Biden run the cabinet meeting the other day, he either did it because Kamala didn't want to step up and do it, or because he disliked her so much, he'd rather have Jill doing it. But if I was Harris and I wanted to demonstrate my leadership, I would have insisted, Joe, if you're going to turn it over to anybody, it should be me so that I can show leadership and earn votes.
I think you're spot on that. I mean, I was like a gasp. I'm like, Biden said, like, I don't know, he spoke for 30 seconds or 45 seconds, something like that, and then turned it over to, I saw the picture where, everybody's looking at Jill and, the cameras are on her and, he's just sitting there like, he fell off a log or something. I mean, God, really embarrassing. I mean, to think that our current sitting president, oh my goodness. Well, I mean,
it was worse than that because they had the meeting books that were embossed with gold embossing, and it had Joe Biden's signature under the seal of the president, and under Joe's signature there was Jill Biden's signature, which to me was totally out of place, and it made Joe Biden look weaker still, even than we believe he is.
Oh my God, horrific. Hey, and Richard, did you catch news that broke middle of the day today? The U.S. is now sending more armed service to the Middle East. Harris made that ridiculous statement during the debate that we don't have any active duty combat soldiers in harm's way. No, we've got 40,000 over in the Middle East right now. If you don't think that's harm's way, I don't know what the hell is. But did you catch that, Richard? We're sending more American troops to the Middle East as this Israeli-Hezbollah situation spirals out of control.
Well, there's two things about that that to me are interesting. One, they have just set up, their strategy is to say, we need a ceasefire now. Well, that's not really a strategy, that's a hope. And so the question is, what are they trying to do to get a ceasefire? And where the ceasefire has been stopped, it's all on the Hamas side, but yet they put pressure on Israel. The second thing I would say is a 3-word statement that goes back to 1964, and that is a Gulf of Tonkin. And that was the supposed firing that got us involved in the Vietnam War that lasted until actually 75 or so when we pulled the last troops and our embassy out. And so when we have 40,000 people over there and the Mediterranean is full of our ships, it's only going to take one accident to draw us into a large conflict over there.
Oh, you're so right about that. There's just no question about it. And it's a dangerous situation over there. And when accidents happen, and they do frequently, this close to an election, the ramifications could absolutely be enormous. But I'll tell you one thing, Richard, from pagers exploding to radios exploding to the effort the Israelis are doing to take out any place that they perceive that there's rockets being launched at Israel by Hezbollah, I really think Netanyahu, I think they just finally said enough is enough of this, and we are going to make Israel secure again. And I don't see anything Biden and Blinken and that hapless group at the White House is going to do to change things. I just don't see that. Okay, we're going to take a mid-course break here, but when we come back, we're going to dive into some things that Harris is now doing, which are so far off the beaten path. It's just bizarre. And what about Tim Walz? Boy, I'm glad I haven't seen him on the campaign trail. That is one weird bird, folks. And we'll talk about him in a little bit too. All right, we'll be back in 90 seconds.
Former national Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
The Donor Deck represents a groundbreaking independent crowdfunding initiative driven by patriots like you to bring back our esteemed President Donald J. Trump to office. With unwavering passion, we pledge all profits from the sale to MAGA Inc. and Fight Like a Flynn PAC. The exquisitely detailed challenge coin is a timeless collectible to be passed down to generations. It symbolizes your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. Get your Donor Deck now. Go to the Patriot.tv store and click on Donor Deck. Enjoy the magnificent artwork and scripture on each playing card, knowing our appreciation for your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. You'll get this keepsake collectible challenge coin acknowledging your support for Donald Trump's run back to the White House, and the Donor Deck of 52 exquisite playing cards, plus a beautiful display case to show your challenge coin. Go to the Patriot.tv store and get your Donor Deck now.
Hey folks, got my Donor Deck right here with my commemorative coin. Hey listen, if Donald Trump wins this election, these are going to be collector's items. Great, great gifts. Folks, whether you buy one, buy 10, or buy 100, scroll down to Election Edge, your favorite show host here. Click on Election Edge. It'll take you right to where you can order Donor Deck. These are great little trinkets, folks. $29.99, great little thing to give away, whether it be to your office, secretaries, kids, nephews, nieces. Pick up your Donor Decks. Okay, Richard, Kamala Harris is now, besides trying to reinvent herself on virtually every issue, moving to the center, abandoning the leftist that we know she really is. I think voters are starting to peel the onion away here and see that, hey, as you guys like to say in Texas, all hat and no cattle. I mean, not to throw one Texas one your way, but I mean, are you reading this the same way I am, that people might finally be saying, hey, this honeymoon is over. No more joy, no more vibe. I want to know what you really stand for.
Well, we really see a distinct difference between Trump and Harris in this area, because Donald Trump, if he's anything, he's genuine and authentic. He never changes. He doesn't try to speak like a Texan in Texas. He speaks like a New Yorker. He speaks like a New Yorker everywhere. But Kamala Harris goes out of her way, and I think it's insulting to go into the South and speak like a Southerner and go into an urban area and speak like she's from an urban area. And I think people who see her enough and see her in more than one place will recognize that and recognize that she is insulting them. I think her greatest strength has been in her performance art at the debate and in some of these presentations where she's changed her dialect. I think she could be a great asset on Broadway, because that's where they appreciate performance.
And you know what? I'm going to say something that may surprise you, Richard, but as well as she did in that debate from a optics perspective, and just from, I know she dodged a lot of questions, but she was a smooth operator. And when I watched that debate, I'm literally saying to myself, they've got to be thinking that she's ahead, or they would not be doing this strategy. Yes, it worked for Joe Biden because it was a COVID year, but we're not in a COVID anymore. And if you just sort of fast track and say, well, she did okay in the debate, what's the BS about her coming and doing, a press conference or an interview? I mean, she's done 0 press conferences since she was the anointed one to replace Biden. 0. Now, she's not doing national interviews other than that softball with Dana Bash, which is ancient history. So I don't know, Richard. She's got the capability of doing it. Yeah, a lot of people will say, well, she's word salad and this, that. But look, she's not a she's not a dumbass, as a lot of people like to say. I mean, she was a California Attorney General. She was a United States Senator. She's been Vice President 3.5 years. You can disagree vehemently with their policies, which we do, but to say this lady is, anything other than pretty sharp, I mean, I don't know. I think look, I'm not going to give the Democratic campaign advice, but if they want to keep her hidden like they did with Joe Biden, who I perfectly understood that, just let them keep doing it. Let the fake accents be the rule. And, when voters show up to vote, they're going to teach them a lesson that, hey, if you want my vote, you better ask for it and tell me what you stand for. And that is clearly not happening.
Well, I'm kind of glad she's doing it in a way, because in a campaign, the choice is either you define yourself or your opponent defines you. And the more she stays hidden, the easier it is for Donald Trump to define her. But he does not have to define her with his words or descriptions about her. All he has to do is play her words back and then say he approves the message, which he's doing. And I think it's a masterful strategy. And they're standing back and allowing him to define her with her past words. And the longer that goes on, the more I think it will help Trump and hurt her.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. On a sort of a humorous but not so thing, folks, there's a dinner held every 4 years. It's called the Al Smith Dinner. It's for Catholic charities, and it's tradition that the Republican and the Democratic candidates show up, and there can be a little bit of humor, a lot of humor, okay? It got a little testy with Trump and Hillary Clinton, but, traditionally they have that dinner. They didn't have it during the COVID year, I don't think. But going back to 1984, presidential candidates from both the Republican and Democratic side have gone to the Al Smith Dinner for, quote, a little bit of humor. Now, Trump said he would go, but Kamala, whatever, the vice president, she's not going to attend. Richard, is this a mistake? I mean, Trump calling her Comrade Kamala, I mean, it sort of fits right in. If you can't even bring yourself down to go to the Al Smith Dinner, sort of poke a little fun at yourself and your opponent. I mean, do they have her so tightly scripted that no off the cuff is permitted? I mean, I was sort of surprised by that.
Well, I think there's two things here. One, at that dinner, you get fun poked at you, and so you have to have a thick skin to take that humor that's poked at you, and you also have to be able to communicate humor about others as well. And so there's a risk of her not liking to be teased and or not being able to communicate. But you said something I have to interject on, because you said comrade. And one of the most interesting things I think in this campaign that I never thought I would see in American politics is she being defined as a communist or a Marxist, and no one in the Democrat Party or media rebuffing that or disputing it. They're all allowing that to be hung around her neck without any qualification at all. And I never thought I'd see that in American politics.
And Trump doesn't miss an opportunity. I mean, everywhere he goes, Comrade Kamala is here with us. And he's pounding that liberal record that she has as a San Francisco liberal, just like Mike Dukakis was a Massachusetts liberal. And it's interesting, Richard, I went back and I was sort of looking at this. And we're not going to talk about the Willie Horton ad, but George went from 17 points down to 8 points up on Dukakis by just painting him as a Massachusetts left-wing liberal. And I think some of that is starting to stick to her. Between the non-answers, between not being able to answer, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Because every time she gets asked that question, she talks about, how she was brought up in a middle-class family, even though her parents were both doctors, and she grew up, in Montreal for part of the time. No, I mean, people want to hear answers. What are you going to do about the border? And Richard, it's sort of, when I'm sort of tying this together now, I'm saying, wait a minute. Something is a little fishy below the surface. She's now going to go to the border. She wants another debate with Trump. She's not going to that Smith dinner? Okay, she's saying, well, I got to be campaigning. I'm starting to think maybe something internally is shifting, because maybe they're finally saying we can't do this anymore. This strategy has run its course. And Richard, what about the esteemed Vice President Tim Walz? That comment he made the other day I thought was precious. He said, and I quote, "We can't take 4 more years of this." And I'm like, what did I just hear there? I mean, what was your thoughts when you heard him say that? I mean, he was basically a direct indictment his boss, Kamala Harris.
Well, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, he swerved into the truth, and it only lasted for a minute. There are so many issues, and Trump is tying her to her past actions. The one that's the latest was where she told Oprah that if somebody came in her house, she'd shoot them. And yet there's video, and I hope the Trump campaign will play both sides of that and play that video that's where she said that they were going into people's houses to make sure people were properly handling their guns. That should scare every person, whether you have a gun in your house or not, to death, because if they'll come in for a gun, they'll come in for whatever other purpose, gas stove, using too much electricity, whatever else they want to do. Once they decide they can come into your house, they'll do it again. And so to me, there's a great opportunity for President Trump to display that. And there are millions of gun owners in this country who ought to recognize that and extrapolate how broad that power could be if she's elected.
Well, I think that if the Trump campaign were really focused, which I think they are, focus on those voters in Pennsylvania who haven't even registered to vote that are gun owners. I mean, the vast bulk of those are going to be Trump supporters, but there's a lot of people, Richard, in a lot of states, I'm not picking on Pennsylvania, where gun owners, they don't want to register to vote because they don't want someone knowing that they have a gun. I mean, well, we really need those voters to come out, because those are generally going to be Trump voters. And when they realize what's at stake in this election, Richard, boy, that is a natural Trump contingent. And, it's another interesting thing. That whole interview where Harris brought up the piece about, use your gun to shoot someone. Someone pointed out to me the other day, look, she's got so much Secret Service protection. I know the point she was making, but, sometimes when a politician says something, believe him, it's the truth. So, again, I don't think she wanted to piss off the hardcore left wing of her party by saying she had a gun and she would use it, but she did sort of speak the truth. Now, we know that gunmen's never going to get in Kamala Harris's house because massive Secret Service protection, but I did think her point was noteworthy, and it illustrated what the government can do, which is what your point was, Richard. Got to be very careful with stuff like that. All right, we're going to take our final break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the debate, the Nebraska situation. Will it change? Will it not? Should Trump do the debate? Should he not? Richard has some interesting thoughts on that. We'll be back in 90 seconds.
Attention business owners, are you ready to advertise to millions of loyal patriots ready to buy your products or services? Here's your golden opportunity to advertise with Mark Schaftlein. When you advertise on Election Edge, you've aligned your company with a trusted voice and connected with an audience that shares your values. Mark hosts the exciting new live show that delves into every facet of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, offering insightful analysis, expert interviews, and up-to-the-minute coverage of the key events and developments throughout the election season. When you advertise on Election Edge, you're aligning your brand with integrity, loyalty, and a dedication to truth. Mark's audience is passionate, conservative, and committed to the values your business stands for. When given the choice, Mark's followers will buy your product or service over other woke companies. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your brand with the power of Patriot TV. Reach out to us today at advertise@patriot.tv. The Donor Deck represents a groundbreaking independent crowdfunding initiative driven by patriots like you to bring back our esteemed President Donald J. Trump to office. With unwavering passion, we pledge all profits from the sale to MAGA Inc. and Fight Like a Flynn PAC. The exquisitely detailed challenge coin is a timeless collectible to be passed down to generations. It symbolizes your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. Get your Donor Deck now. Go to the Patriot.tv store and click on Donor Deck. Enjoy the magnificent artwork and scripture on each playing card, knowing our appreciation for your continuous dedication to assisting President Trump in his quest to rejuvenate America to its former greatness. You'll get this keepsake collectible challenge coin acknowledging your support for Donald Trump's run back to the White House, and the Donor Deck of 52 exquisite playing cards, plus a beautiful display case to show your challenge coin. Go to the Patriot.tv store and get your Donor Deck now.
Okay, Richard, debate or no debate? You've got some strong opinions on that. I'm seeing some things come across that, hey, Trump needs to participate in this. You know, it's a very tight race. The voters deserve the opportunity. Richard, you have a little bit different opinion, I believe.
Yes, and I want to back up a minute about the voter registration issue you were mentioning a minute ago. I would encourage your viewers to talk to their neighbors, make sure they're registered to vote. I don't believe this election is Republican versus Democrat in the traditional sense. I believe it's in the America First movement versus the Marxist globalist type movement. And if we do not win this election, I believe we'll be going more toward a Marxist globalist society. And yes, the debate, I don't think Trump should debate at this particular time. Harris needs it more than he does. But more importantly, if she wanted that to enunciate her positions as she said she did when she asked for the debate, it would put more pressure on her to enunciate those positions in other areas as well. And I believe Trump has an opportunity here to redefine the debate parameters for future elections, networks, host, things of that nature because of the way he's been treated this year.
Well, one thing I agree with Trump on, he can make the case. He goes, hey, I've already done a CNN debate. And again, I thought in that debate, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash were fair. Trump even said himself he thought they were fair. But, he also accepted a Fox News debate and she declined that. So, I mean, is Trump negotiating here? Is he posturing? I mean, here's the thing, Richard. When I see telltale signs that the media is pushing Trump to participate in that second debate, and he is getting some encouragement from people in his own political party that, hey, you really should. I'm saying, I always have to ask this question. Why is the media saying anything to try to get Trump to do something? Normally it's like, the 180 effect. If the media says go left, you go right. So is this to try to, quote, goat Trump into, doing something that's not in his best interest? I initially, Richard, to be honest with you, a few weeks ago, after that first debate, I thought it would be political malpractice for him not to participate in that debate. Now, people are making the argument, well, Trump's saying, well, it's too late in the day. Too many people have already voted. There is a lot of truth to that. But the also fact is this is one day later than when Trump and Biden had their last debate in 2020. So maybe Trump's negotiating. I think he's doing it now from a position of strength. So will it happen? I still don't know. And I think, Richard, a lot of it depends on what Trump's internal polling tells him. If he senses that he thinks he can gain from it, or that people want to, how you could possibly want to know more about Trump, I don't know, because he's an open book. Harris, on the other hand, is not in there. So I don't know, Richard. I mean, would it benefit the American people to see it? Yes. But again, who could gain more from it? I mean, I'm sitting here, again, listening to what you said, and I'm second guessing myself. I'm like, well, who can gain more here? Probably Harris more than Trump, because bear in mind, does it really matter if polls say she won or he won last one? No, it really only matters what that, we'll call them 5 to 10% of undecided voters. And I don't think it's in the 5 to 10. I think it's probably around 5. In 7 swing states, that's your audience. So people can come out and say, well, the first one, there were 70 million people watched. Okay, but how many of them changed their minds? Richard, focus groups that we saw after, despite the fact the media claiming Harris won, a lot of the focus groups said, nah, after seeing that, I'm voting for Trump. So I don't know. I mean, if you were his campaign advisor, you would say don't do it?
Well, first thing, there's an old adage in negotiations that says whoever needs the deal most loses. And right now, I think she needs the deal most. On the surface of the debate, it looked better for her because of all the flowery language and everything that she was using. But I think that the American people were smarter than that, and they saw through that, and they saw Trump's authenticity. And what was interesting to me was after the debates, news started coming out that she may have been supplied questions. She may have been told that she wouldn't be fact checked. And just when people were starting to look into that to see if it was true, all of a sudden there's another assassination attempt. And now no one talks about that, which makes people wonder if there's any connection to some of those types of events.
Well, ABC, I mean, that was a horrific performance. And, you know, if Trump does accept this, another debate with Harris, you better write the damn rules to it, because that was just ridiculous. And you know, ABC, that whistleblower came out, it has not been debunked at all. I mean, that whistleblower claimed that they knew he was going to get fact checked. They knew that she wouldn't be fact checked. They knew that she wouldn't be asked questions. Well, why didn't you go public with Joe Biden's cognitive disabilities? I mean, you placated the American public, as did the entire Democratic Party, trying to basically pull one over our eyes. And think about this, Richard. If Biden had not had that absolutely debacle of a debate, say he had just been bad instead of disastrous, he never would have left the race. And we'd be sitting here now, Trump probably way ahead against a guy who clearly he's continuing to deteriorate. So I don't know. I think you're right. We'll see as it gets a little bit closer. I think, you know, do I think that the last debate, October 1st, between Waltz and J.D. Vance is going to be it? I don't know. Maybe they got some room to negotiate this piece out. You know, it was interesting, Richard. We go on break, and a little birdie whispered in my ear, Biden is continuing to berate his negotiators to try to get something done on this Israeli-Hamas situation while he's still relevant. And I'm thinking, right now, Biden's been an embarrassment on that. You know, he said, well, you know, we're close, we're real close, we're real close. And as soon as he says that, now we have a two-front war going on in Israel, not just a one-front war. So I can't put any credibility in anything Biden's doing, but he seems to me, you know, he's an angry old man, and he's pissed off that he's being tied to lack of accomplishments. His name is being associated with this war. His name is associated with illegal immigration. His name is associated with high inflation. Not exactly the way I think, you know, he wanted to go. All right, let me ask you this. Quick commentary on this piece, and it does relate back to Electoral College. This Nebraska thing that got a lot of publicity, Richard, it doesn't look to me like Nebraska's going to do anything on this election cycle. They can't get one or two recalcitrant Republican state senators to move. So is this story getting ready to die an easy death?
Well, I hope that they don't change the election rules this late in the cycle. From a principle standpoint, we didn't like it a few years ago when the Democrats were changing rules in the middle of the election cycle in other states. And I don't think it's good from a principle and leadership standpoint to do so now in a state where we think we can pick one up. I believe in principle over power and honor over ambition. And I don't think it's good leadership long term to do that. And I would like to add one thing about that deal that Biden's trying to get in the Middle East. It illustrates why we don't need professional politicians. He wants a deal for himself. He doesn't want a deal for the people. Donald Trump, when he did the deals, there was nothing in it for him. It was all for the people's standpoint. And that to me is the difference. And again, whoever wants to deal most loses because you end up getting a deal where you give more away. And I'm afraid Biden will give the ranch away if he tries to get something done before the election.
Oh, you and I both know it. I mean, he's trying to do this, get something done for the election, so it can be a feather in Kamala Harris' hat. I think the differences are too vast. I just don't see that coming together. Again, Trump is a professional negotiator. Biden is not. And I don't see that happening. And obviously, when the Kamala Harris was talking about, hey, I met with Zelensky 3 days before the Russians invaded, not exactly her finest moment on the campaign either. But again, you associate the Biden-Harris team, war in the Middle East, war in Russia, Ukraine, high prices. Look, Richard, there's no accident. Donald Trump's getting very favorable reaction on the economy, like we talked about earlier in the show. And you know how I know that's a good thing? When the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, who works for Joe Biden, says, oh, well, listen, the economy's pretty good right now, but we really can't take the risk of having Trump in charge because then bad things could happen. I mean, that's a little unseemly coming out of a Treasury Secretary's mouth. Okay, look, we only got 2 minutes left. I do want to talk to you about some Senate races. We focus so much on the presidential race, but right now, Republicans are leading by a pretty good chunk in Montana. West Virginia, they're definitely winning that. That'd make it 51-49. There's two tight races in Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick and Bob Casey. We've played the McCormick video on this show a lot. And in Ohio, Bernie Moreno, who I know, met him down at Mar-a-Lago, he's running against Sherrod Brown, terrific guy. He's tightened that race up. Richard, Republicans got a shot here. Could Trump end up having coattails and pull these guys across and pull Ted Cruz in Texas and Rick Scott in Florida, who are in inexplicably tight races?
Well, Scott and Cruz are having hundreds of millions of dollars thrown against them, so they need help. But yes, I think the coattails are there. If someone asks a question and it's a standalone question about a Senate race, you may say one thing, but when you stand in the voting booth and you start going down the ballot and the first election is president, and if you're going to vote for President Trump, unless there's something going on specific to you and the candidate for Senate, why would you break and change parties at that standpoint? So I would expect that in conjunction, the two races together, they'll end up being more in line than they would otherwise. It's very rare to have one candidate with higher numbers and another with lower numbers. Usually they're pretty even, and I think that will help us.
One thing I'll share with you. Okay, so Ted Cruz won his last election by 3 points in Texas. Now, in a lot of states, 3 points is a landslide. There's a lot of Republicans in Texas, folks. So, could Ted Cruz eke out a 2-point win? Yeah, probably something like that. But Rick Scott, his last win in the Florida Senate race, he won by like 1/4 of a percentage point. So he's used to having tight races. But look, folks, Florida is not a purple state. It is a red state. We have a Republican governor, Republican Senate. It's red through just like Texas is. So I'm optimistic, Richard, that we will maintain those seats, win Montana, maybe pick up Ohio or Pennsylvania. Hey, listen, thank you for being my guest today. Wonderful having you on. We're out of time, though. So, folks, we'll be back tomorrow. Election Edge. See you on Tuesday, and we'll break down everything for you.